Right, it's boss time. Let's see how fast we can melt the boss over here. And this is going to be corrupted. And we've actually scaled fire damage. So instead, our Ballista is... Oh my gosh, the boss is barely going to even be able to do anything. The boss didn't even get to do anything. This build is just... It's out of control, man. Alright, check this part out over here. So this is going to be a boss. This one's corrupted. But in just a few seconds, we are able to achieve... In about 4 seconds here, we have 100... fire shred stacks. Each one of these applies a debuff of 5% resistance. So you're going to be able to melt bosses very, very quick with this. Alright guys, let's hop right into it. One of the best builds in the game is definitely lots of variants of the Falconer. So this build is going to incorporate basically 3 different damage sources into one. So you're going to have a huge bonus amount of damage to your Ballista, and Ballista is one of the most powerful builds in the game, with not only AoE clear, but also the ability to do an insane amount of damage on bosses. And on top of that, we have Explosive Trap to actually give Explosive Ballista even more damage. We also have the Falcon to get even more damage. And all these will have great synergy with each other. So starting right off, we'll do some gameplay of a little bit higher in terms of the corruption, and then we'll go ahead and do some like easier content, as most people will probably cap out at about 200 corruption. Realistically, pushing into the thousands of corruption won't be something that I think most players will actually try to push for. You'll have a lot more fun, I would say, when you don't really have to scale in the defensive category, when you can run certain boots like the Morning Frost. So starting right off, what gives us so much damage? Because I've had a few people ask me, hey, I followed someone else's guide for Explosive Ballista, but yours seems to do more damage. So how our build does a lot more damage than maybe some other builds is because we are actually going to be getting not only 100% crit strike chance for us, but that will also transfer over to our minions. And the Ballista is considered a minion. And on top of that, we're actually applying a ton of negative resistances. So it's like Fire Shred. You can see over here where it says 112. As far as I'm aware of, there's no internal cap. And the way we apply that is with our Explosive Trap. Each one of the shots will actually shoot out 6 explosive traps. How it works is it shoots out 3, but if those register, there's a 100% chance to gain another one. So basically, on specifically bosses, 1 shot equals 6 shots, if that makes any sense. So 1 button push or keystroke will activate 6 stacks, and that's why that's at this number over here. And what it does is it's going to reduce the fire resistance by 5. Now, it is less effective against bosses. It gives you basically 2% of the fire resistance shred on the bosses. But if you're stacking like hundreds, yeah, things are going to be melting quite fast. Most of the time, it's going to melt before you even really get to that point. But at the end of the day, that's what essentially is going to answer the question in terms of this build, in terms of how it's getting way more damage than maybe some other builds. Now, on top of that, if you want to run a cold build, that's totally fine. I actually think it's really great to actually run a cold variant if you want to play with the boots that will give you a massive amount of extra damage. And those boots are a unique pair of boots, and they are called Morning Frost. And they are one of the most powerful boots in the entire game for lots of builds. And that's because it's going to give you extra damage per dexterity, but you have this downside of getting negative physical and cold res. If you want to push into the higher corruption, I would really recommend you guys to maybe swap off of these and just run regular pair of boots with like armor or HP. But it's up to you. If you really want to, by all means, you can throw in Morning Frost, and then you're going to have to get a lot more resistances. But that is another thing that you can do in the game if you want to go ahead and actually gain more damage. And for some of the bosses, I can swap right into it and kill the boss before a lot of times it's able to really do anything. But let's go ahead and go over the pieces of gear. We'll go over the rest of the passives and all those things as well. So this one, just as a heads up, is going to be for the end game, pretty much for players that are about 90-ish or have been able to purchase exalted pieces of gear. I do have another build I will link down below in case you guys are still like doing the campaign, or if you're kind of in the earlier stages of the end game when you're maybe going from like 50 to 70, as those ones don't have any exalted pieces of gear, as this one's mainly focusing in on relatively min-max. Like, I don't have 4 legendary potential in every single slot. I don't have the best rolls, but this is going to be primarily what you're kind of looking for towards the end game. And if you really want to push the higher corruption, if you're wondering, can this build do it? I'd probably recommend to swap off the explosive traps with the bow and maybe run a shield instead, as that's going to give you a lot more survivability. But again, 99% of the player base is probably not going to try to push, 2,000 corruption. Most players, 200 is totally fine in terms of like min-maxing. So starting right off, let's go over the pieces of gear from the top. So peak in the mountain. Now the things in the red or like pink over here, those are the legendary potential that I happen to roll. Do I think these are good? No, I actually got really unlucky. Ideally, what you want to try to hit is a high amount of dexterity. So this one over here happens to have a lot of crit strike chance, and this is all Peak of the Mountain is good for. Basically, try to get something with legendary potential and throw on something with dexterity. That's the only stat that you really want. I just happen to get unlucky with this one, but I'm definitely going to re-roll a couple of these, and ideally, you're going to get dexterity. Everything that you see is the exact same from the gameplay, but I will mention the things that you are trying to look for, because again, I didn't get the best things. So again, Dex and +2 Falconer would be kind of ideal, or anything else that's defensive is totally fine. That was a tier 6 or 7 armor over there. In terms of the roll, it was a tier 6 on the armor. And then for the amulet over here, just anything that's going to give you resistances, so that can be the gold amulet or the bone amulet. It just gives you double res. And then what you're really looking to try to get is specifically, minion damage as well as crit strike multi. If you don't reach the crit strike chance, you can also get crit strike chance in any of the other pieces of gear that you would need. But I just happen to have Exalted on the minion damage, and the minion damage is your main source of damage, by the way. If you're in the lower corruption, your explosive traps can actually kill things on their own, but most of the damage is actually going to be coming from the Ballista as well as the Falcon. The Falcon will just one-shot everything as well, pretty much throughout the entirety of the game, because the Falconer class is pretty overtuned. So speaking of the Falconer, because we are going to be running the Talons of Valor. It's pretty much the best in slot for the bows for many, many builds, because it has a huge amount of extra bonus to crit strike chance. But if you can get additional crit strike chance on it, I happen to roll 2 of them on it, so that's great, but these are only tier 6s. Ideally, yes, you try to get, 4 legendary potential and here, tier 7s, multiple tier 7s, but this one was okay. Don't worry too much about the +2 falconry or dive bomb or any of those. I mean, ideally, yes, it's good, but ideally, you want to try to get that crit strike chance as high as possible, as in the rolls that it can roll over here is 3 to 5. Try to purchase one or get one that has 5%. That is actually going to be more important, because that's going to be your base crit that everything scales off of. And then for our armor, if you really do need to get crit, there is a armor that can give you 3% base crit. That's an option as well. But getting the falconry armor is going to roll with the implicit of dexterity. Try to get that up there. And then I like to have a lot more mana here. So on one of the prefixes, I like to get a T6 or 7 mana. And that just really helps out, because you could spam on the bosses earlier on. And a lot of times, depending on the corruption, you can actually eliminate the boss before it is able to do anything. Sometimes some bosses will have phases where they have like an immunity and you gotta wait. But for the most part, 1 to 3 cycles of like the boss's rotation is what I would consider efficient enough, and having the extra mana really lets you ramp up those fire shred stats, and then the explosive ballistas just do an insane amount of damage. So I really like having a bigger mana pool, because being out of mana in any action RPGs feels bad, so I like a little bit more mana here. And then for our quiver, the ivory quiver is really good too. This one gives you crit multi. The ivory is going to give you double res. And then I also put armor shred on this, because that affects all your damage, which is excellent. And there's also a slow. So for the defenses, instead of getting glancing blows, what I've opted for in my build is to add slow and frailty. Frailty will also be in this build, and that's going to help out with some survivability. And so if you slow them down and on top of that add the frailty, that's another 18% damage reduction on frailty, and then another set amount of slow, so you can kind of add those together, and that helps out. A lot of times in this build, unless you're getting like absolutely just one shot, you're not going to die too often, because most of the stuff just melts so fast. But looking to try to get minion damage is ideal, and dex every single area that you can get it. And then for one of our rings over here, we're running some mana regen. This is just on a ruby ring. You can also look out for opal rings, but just getting dex and some defensive stats is all great. This one, it says spell damage, which it rolled with it on the seal, and I purchased it in the bazaar. Keep in mind, just as a bonus tip, if you are purchasing items in the bazaar, the sealed affix does not even show up. So you can actually get better deals by just browsing them yourself versus looking for like a sealed thing. It's not gonna like exactly show up. It'll just show up with another mod. So make sure you mouse over it, because you may want to craft over certain things. Next up over here, as far as our belt, so spider silk belts are actually really great, but if you happen to get a Praetorian belt, it just gives you armor. and it's up to you, whatever you need. If you need resistances, yeah, Spider Silk is excellent for that, but if you get some extra armor, that's fine. One thing that you want to try to get in this build, in total, just make sure you have 100% critical strike avoidance. Crit strike chance from the enemies is absolutely going to get you melted. That's one thing that I've noticed with this game in general. In last Epoch, if the enemies are critting you, you need some sort of way to either reduce all the damage with like Citadel boots, or you can either get crit strike avoidance, or you can get like the damage reduction from the crits. Just get that to 100 and then you just ignore it. And then we have a copper ring. If you need more crit, get copper rings. In fact, I'm overcapped on some of my resistances, but that can be another thing to look out for. If you need the resistances on the suffixes, go for that. But again, dex and mana regen are kind of what I'm looking for on rings. And then on our gloves over here, more minion damage, more dex, and then health and armor. And then I really like arcane bracers as the base because you get mana regen. And for the boots over here, just some defensive stats. I like to get increased movement speed, Solarium Greaves, Hyborian Greaves, Citadel. Those are all great options for the base on your boots. But again, dex, movement speed are the most important stats. And then if you can get a relic that has increased to Ballista, that is ideal. If you can get that to be +4, that's awesome. 3 or 4 is what you're really looking for, but this one happened to have good dex, and I got it for relatively cheap. Just has some extra resistances on it. And then for our skills, we're running Explosive Trap, Ballista, Dive Bomb, Falconery, and Aerial Assault. I don't really activate Ballista too often because I like the feel of actually shooting this stuff myself. Plus, it gives us more damage and gives us extra cooldown so we can spam our other skills. However, for a lot of the bosses, they'll have like some sort of phase, and so while it's during that phase, I'll set up some ballistas because there's like, you know, talking moments. As far as blessings go, the important ones are basically getting your crit strike avoidance. I have it right here, and then getting extra mana. These are the two ones that I really like. The rest, I mean, it's kind of up to you what you want. There's nothing super important here. But getting the frailty is something I would advise to get because, again, Glancing Blows is going to require a hefty investment, and I prefer to just get Frailty because it's basically half of Glancing Blow on just like one thing. The reason why it's so great is because it just needs to get 3 stacks, and each one is, I believe, 6% damage reduction, so you get a total of 18, which is half of a Glancing Blow's base default, like in terms of its damage reduction. So as far as like the idols go, just a bunch of resistances and extra life where you can get it. That's totally fine. But that's it for the gear. Now let's go ahead and hop into the passive. So obviously you got about 20 points over in the rogue tree, and so just extra attack speed, get some extra damage here, because even though we don't deal damage, us dealing damage with Explosive Trap and hitting the target is going to shred their fire res, and as well as apply a lot of different debuffs like frailty and the other things to give us extra survivability. And then so Steady Hand, so these two are the only important ones. Then like honestly, put it wherever you want. I just put 1, 2 points over here. You can put more points in evasion if you want, but nothing's too important here. Now the Falconer, this is the most important one. So we're getting Wilderness over here, maxing that one. Stamina, just 1 point in Rangers. This allows you to actually stack even more damage with your Falcon. And then Raptor's Wing, 1 or 2 points in here is great. Agile Hunt, anything that says Dexterity, you're just putting all the points into. Handler over here, extra base crit for your Ballista. And then Evasion Tactics, so again, it's just maxing out all the things that have Dexterity. 3 points in this because your Falcon basically heals you to full. As long as, you know, it's hitting a target, you get points per point of Dexterity. If it hits like, you know, big group, you're just going to max HP instantly. That's why my HP like doesn't really drop too often, and if it does drop, it's going to go right back up instantly, unless you're taking a boss and you get one-shotted. I mean, this thing is just so good, because with Peak of the Mountain, the downside is you can't leech, but it's fine because, well, you have 100% crit. Well, how it works is you can't leech on a crit, but since we are going to be healing off of our Falcon, this is really good. And then Intuitive Connection, this makes the build feel so much smoother because while I'm attacking with my Explosive Trap, I can also have the Falcon just kind of get some extra DPS in. And then we're getting maxed out on Needle-like Precision, so that's more crit strike chance and crit multiplier for not only us, but also the minions. And because the minions get a bonus on the passive from our crit multi or crit strike chance, that is going to basically double dip, which is awesome. And then this is going to give us extra armor per points of dex, so stacking more dex is more survivability and more damage, and then also more armor if the Falcon hits. And then Tailwind, one of the best things in the game, so you take less damage and you get to move a lot faster. Just excellent thing overall. And then with Blade Dancer, I put 8 points into this because it's dexterity, that's all you need to know. I had to put 2 more points into here to reach the next threshold, which is to gain this pretty much just for the HP. It does give you Dust Shroud, but the main benefit is getting the extra HP, because this one gives you 10 per. So I like this one over here. You can put 8 points into it if you want, dip out a point out of some sort of damage, or if you reach the crit strike chance, then you have enough crit strike chance, because there's another set of crit over here. If you want to remove this one, like 1 point here to max out on more HP, get about 2k HP. I'd say that that's about good for doing specifically about 200-ish in terms of the corruption. You'll have a really smooth gaming experience. And then in the marksman tree, just this over here to gain extra HP and increase bow attack speed, and then also focus fire for more dexterity. As far as our skills go, you don't really have to equip Ballista if you don't want to, but main skills, explosive trap over here. The most important thing is to actually get this impact trigger. So this is going to make it so the things explode immediately. And this is important because the explosive traps don't need to actually detonate. You can over activate them if you want to, but I like the responsiveness of getting that armor shred to just really, really high up, as well as that fire res shred. Now, if you want to, you could get something that has +2 explosive trap and throw 2 more points into this, and then you're looking at getting like 200 stacks instantly, but I felt like it was already enough. I didn't need the roll, but if I did get the roll, I wouldn't mind getting an extra couple points into this. This is not a bad thing at all. But the most important thing is getting the trap sprinkler as well as the auto bombardment. This gives you a 70, this gives you a 30, that equals 100. So you shoot out 3 of the traps, and then it's going to activate 3 more. So that's how we get 6 per activation. And then we also get ballistas. Now, an important thing is don't be too low on mana, because if you're too low on mana, this still makes the ballistas cost mana when they activate, when they trigger off of the explosive trap. You have a 20% chance and you shoot out 6. So on average, most of the time, one button will give you 120% chance of summon a ballista. Well, think of it like 20 times 6. So that's kind of how it works. So pretty much that activates 1 ballista, and it activates a very smooth gameplay experience. You also want to reduce the mana cost. And then over here, whenever the Falcons detonate your explosive traps, you can get a bonus. And then with Ballista over here, if you want to go cold, that is an option with Morning Frost, but pretty much you just want to put Arm Construction, max that out, and then put it into Tripwire over here. And you can go ahead and put maxed out Perfect Aim, because you want your crit to also roll over. And then if you do happen to get +2 Ballista, like you get +3 or even 4, you can max out Heavy Bolts as well. But I think Shared Enhancements over here and Perfect Aim, these are the 2 important ones over here. You only need 1 point into this one, and you're going to have enough crit already, so you don't need to put 2 points into it. But if you are lacking in some area, by all means go ahead and do so. And then Arm Construction is a really important one as well. But that's what we're doing for the Ballista. And then for the Falconry over here, I like the ones where when you consume the Falconer's Mark, your Falcon's going to get more damage, and it just activates on its own, basically. And then I like to put 1 point into the Wake, because it gives you extra move speed when you consume the Mark. But as far as this goes, there isn't really anything that's super important over here, other than a portion of your global melee crit chance, throwing crit chance, and bow crit chance apply to the Falcon. So remember, our crit is going to transfer over, and then basically our Falcon always crits, and then we have this exposed weakness, so we get extra crit multi. So again, our stuff kind of rolls over. The most important thing is really getting this Hunter Spoils here. But if you don't have enough points, do not take it out of Birds of Prey. This is like Culling Strike at 16%. It's absolutely amazing, so don't skimp out on that one. You can remove some points out of Falcon, or is it a bird? So you can remove some points out of getting the Falcon's damage if you want. Whatever you want to remove, just do not remove this. This is the greatest thing. This means if the enemy is at 16% HP, and especially on bosses, you activate it and it just deletes the boss instantly. It is the greatest thing ever. But yeah, the Falcon, pretty much, you'll see it one-shots everything up until, you could probably go up to about 1,000 corruption. It would still one-shot. The thing with this build, how it works right now in Last Epoch, Ward is just superior. If you want to do, there's kind of a smoke bomb build. It's getting nerfed, so I didn't really want to cover it. But nonetheless, you could get more defenses technically out of that. But if you're really looking to push like 1,000+ corruption, Ward builds are kind of the way to go right now. But I mean, for 99% of players, it's not something that's relevant, but I figured I'd go ahead and mention that. And then for Dive Bomb over here, which is another source of damage, getting extra cooldown on it is great, and you can get extra move speed. I actually feel like this is one of the things that I enjoyed the most over here. And then you can get mana gain on a boss hit over here, and then also giving mana cost reduction. So this is giving us mana cost reduction. You only need 3 points into this to reach it, but it also gives you more damage. I just had some more points, but by all means put it into something else if you want to. You can increase the area, you can add slow stacks if you want, but nothing too important other than I like getting Rushing Wings because it makes the build feel a lot better. but it's because we have talent and that gives us extra points. If you don't have the points, don't worry, it's not something super important for the build. But yeah, I'll link everything down below so you guys can have access to it. So now that we went over the passives, the skills, and everything, and that's going to be one of the top tier builds for season, I guess it's season 1 or season 0 of last Epoch. But let me know, guys, what you think of the build. If you have played it, have some fun with it. It's easily one of the top tier builds in the game. I mean, it does an insane amount of damage, and I was rolling through all of the content. But if I was to improve something on this, I would get more legendary potential, but that's just like really pushing it for min-maxing. But that's going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here and you want to see an update to maybe this build in the future, hit subscribe, turn the bell. But I'm pretty confident that right now it's as best as you can get it without going to like 4 legendary potential and like multiple tier 7s, which is, I want to say, unrealistic for most people to kind of copy if they're looking for a build guide. But there's going to be another awesome build guide that is still the Falconer. It is a Falcon punch build, so that's going to be something that we will be dropping later. It's really, really awesome, and I can't wait to share that with you guys. But take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you have any questions, let me know down below, and I will answer them. But take care, and see you on the next one.